Hi, I'm Georgiana Hernandez. I'm a board member with the League of Women Voters of Dane County, and I'm also the program chair. And I would like to welcome you to this community virtual forum, and where we will be discussing voting rights for formerly incarcerated individuals. And we have as our guests members with EXPO, which stands for Incarcerated People Organizing. And just to give you a little bit of background before I introduce our guests, we did have a forum on this topic in February. It was very well attended. People were very interested in the topic. And so we decided to follow it up with this more in-depth conversation. And so I'd like to turn this over now to Peggy West Schroeder. She's the EXPO statewide campaign manager. Thank you.
I'm Peggy West Schroeder, and I'm excited to be here. You wanted me to talk a little bit about Unlock the Vote? All right. So Unlock the Vote is a campaign that EXPO started a year ago. In June, we kicked off, on June of 2019, we kicked off a campaign to restore voting rights to people in the state of Wisconsin as they exit the prison system. Currently in the state of Wisconsin, if you have a felony conviction, you are not eligible to vote until you are off probation or parole. And so Unlock the Vote, the goal is to restore voting rights to people as soon as they leave prison. And as we launch that campaign and as we get out and talk to people in the community, we realized that we had a lot of misinformation going on, and there were a lot of people that were being disenfranchised. First, they were disenfranchised because they were on probation and parole, and now they're being disenfranchised because it seems very intentional that people are spreading misinformation to keep people from voting. And so I'm very happy to have with me today a couple of our EXPO leaders who not only are leaders in EXPO and in our communities, but they've stepped up and really become leaders in regards to voting. So would you like me to introduce them? All right. So first I have my colleague, Carl Fields. He is a directly impacted leader. He's got 16 years of lived experience in the criminal justice system. And Carl's been a leader both in and outside of the Wisconsin prison system. While Carl was inside, he developed programs and really made a really good use of his time and left prison a better place than he found it, definitely. Today, Carl lends his talents to many boards and organizations across the state, and EXPO is proud to have Carl as our Racine and Kenosha EXPO organizer. And despite being disenfranchised from voting his entire adult life, Carl has not let that stop him be active in local and statewide campaigns, which is one of the things that makes Carl unique and one of the reasons why we wanted Carl to be part of this conversation. Carl understands the importance of voting and is working hard to restore voting rights for himself as well as others, but he's exercising the rights that he does have. And then with me today also is Ray Mendoza, and Ray is a directly impacted leader with 23 years of experience in the U.S. federal system. And Ray is also a community leader. He is the co-founder of Team Havoc. He is a violence interrupter with 414 Life, where he uses his previous experience and his current experience to help make Milwaukee a safer place. And Ray also is a person who has come to realize that voting is important, and he does a lot of work around Unlock the Vote. He's collected signatures for the petition, and Ray was eligible to vote for the first time on Valentine's Day in 2020, and he actually registered to vote through the League of Women Voters in September of 2019 at our Unlock the Vote event here in Milwaukee. So I'm really proud to have these two guys with us this afternoon.
And I'd like to also, I want to say that we have another guest in our midst, and that is Erin Nagy, and she's a public defender, and she may also have a few questions for our guests.
All right.
So let's jump in with some of the questions. I think one of the, maybe I can ask this of you, Carl, if somebody,
go ahead.
if somebody's unsure, if somebody has if somebody's been convicted of a misdemeanor, are they eligible to vote?
That is correct. Currently in the state of Wisconsin, if you are on misdemeanor, parole, probation, or extended supervision, you are allowed to vote, because misdemeanor supervision is something that hasn't excluded you from being able to vote. And I say it that way because I myself, as an ex-incarcerated person, was in fact in prison with somebody who had all and only misdemeanors on the record.
So does that mean that that person could have been voting while he was in prison?
That is correct.
And did he know that?
He was 19 and he did not know that, unfortunately. The fella who I'm thinking about specifically, he was out of Madison. You know, he made some stupid teenager mistakes. They wanted to teach his friends a lesson, so they went hard on him. And no, he was not aware of any of that. Voting was the last thing on his mind. Getting his freedom back and trying to salvage his life because of the damage of incarceration was first and foremost.
What if you're charged with a felony, but you haven't been convicted of a felony?
So basically, you still have your right to vote. I think at least what my experience was is that when I reached the point where I was no longer eligible to vote, the judge actually said, you're no longer eligible to vote. And so that was one of the conversations that we always have amongst ourselves, is that, you know, they make a big deal about taking your voting rights away from you. But when it comes to restoring your voting rights, they don't do the same thing. And they should. You know, not only should you receive, I think your probation parole agent should, say to you, you now have your rights restored, but you also should get it in writing so you can take it to the polls. So if you have a problem at the polls, you have that written documentation with you. In addition to the fact that, I would like for the judges to also send people a letter and say, hey, I made a big deal about taking your rights away from you, and congratulations, you've successfully done everything we've asked you to do, and here you go. You now have your voting rights restored.
So what if I don't get that piece of paper before I want to vote? What should I do?
Ray, you want to take that one?
If you didn't receive a letter that says that you have your right to vote restored, you can either contact EXPO or talk to anybody on the street that have that experience. They're supposed to give you a letter saying what rights were restored once you completed your probation or parole. When I got off of paper in 2019, they didn't give me anything. They just told me, sign your release papers and get out of here. So, and that was federal paper. So I don't know how the state does it, but they're supposed to give you a letter saying that your rights have been restored. And if they don't get it, all you got to do is ask. Somebody somewhere knows somebody at EXPO that can get you connected with them so you can get all the information that you need.
And basically, if you don't get that letter, go anyway. Go to the polls and let them know that you're eligible to vote. If you're no longer on probation and parole and you've been released, and your probation parole agent has said you are now done and you have fulfilled your commitment to the state, you're eligible to vote. Carl can talk a little bit about what might happen at the polls and how you should push through that.
Right. I'm 4.5 years removed from a prison sentence, and we have a lot of colleagues and comrades throughout the state. One in particular is a friend of ours, and the boss of our thing, the associate director, Sarah Ferber. She tells her story far and wide, and her story is heartbreaking because of when she was newly released from being on probation. Immediately she went to the polls when that time came, and they pulled out a sheet and said, your name's on this sheet, which means that you are on felony probation and you cannot vote. And she said, I'm not, and I can prove it, etc. And they gave her a provisional ballot, and they said that, okay, we'll give you this. However, if there seems to be a snag to come up in any of this, then we will simply pass along your case for charges to the DA, and we'll let them sort that out. That is the scariest thing that one can encounter, being newly released from supervision. And reason being is because supervision is incarceration. And when she tells that story, every time she tells it, it sounds so much to me like a civil rights era poll test, poll tax. It feels just like the trying to push one from the polls versus bringing them into it. Like, oh, you think you're off probation? Well, let me take a moment to look that up. Let me take a moment to walk you through this process. It is not a bring a person back into community moment. It is a let me make sure that you know what your status is in this community. And if the mistake is yours in this moment, then felony charges are soon to follow. That is, I have no idea why that has been allowed to stand, but it's legal and it's the process all around the state and a whole lot of other states.
Right. And there's no doubt in our minds that if it was anybody other than Sarah, that person probably would have left. And they would have said, okay, forget it. It's just not worth it. It's not worth having the district attorney investigate me for casting a vote. Other than maybe Ray. Ray probably would have done that too. But Ray's another example. So he registered with the League of Women Voters at our event in September. And then when he went to go vote, he did early voting, which is something we recommend to everybody, especially if it's your first time voting. Go vote early. And so Ray does listen sometimes when you tell him stuff. And so he went and voted early. And thank God he did, and he did run into some issues. They said, oh, Ray, we don't have your registration. We don't have you down. And he said, no, I registered. I really did. And he just went ahead and he registered again. But had he hit a snag at the polls and, would have had to supply some type of documentation, he was set because he early voted. He still had time to either go back to his early voting location or to get to his actual polling site on election day and make sure that he placed his vote. So
mind you, when the lady told me that I wasn't registered, I got extremely angry because I felt like it was a ploy to stop me from voting because I was a convicted felon, and I thought that it was just something that the system was trying to keep on me from, because I haven't been eligible to vote since I was eligible to vote. So at the age of 18, I was already on paper for like the third time. And I hadn't been off of paper or out of prison until 2019. And so for me, it was a big thing to go vote because it was my first time in my life going to vote. And it was actually the first time in my life that I really cared about making a vote. And so when they told me that, like I got a very short temper, so I got mad real quick. But the lady said, you can just go back over there and at the computer and just do it again and it'll be all right. And I was like, it better work this time. And so I went and I did it and it worked and I voted and I was really proud of myself.
Yeah. So this is the reason why, and I think, Ray will say that too. This is the reason why what we're doing with education is so important, because had Ray not have heard from me, like you don't leave that place until they let you vote, it may have been different. He may have just walked out mad and said, well, these people said that they registered me and they didn't register me. And, and I'm upset and now I'm just not going to vote. And it's, extremely important for us specifically, as directly impacted people to have a voice. And at EXPO, we firmly believe that we're uniquely qualified to vote. We've actually had face-to-face interaction with a lot of the people that we vote for, district attorneys, judges. A lot of us have spent time in the state system and in the federal system, which is run by your state reps, your federal reps, your governor, your president. And so, we've been right there on the front line. And so we know that we are right where we belong when we get to our polling place in that voting box.
So Peggy, what needs to change? I mean, what can be done so that, I mean, is it a matter of when people are off paper that they must get something in the mail or they must be sent an email? I mean, how do you advocate for that?
So we do have legislators that are working on actually making it state law that probation and parole has to give people paperwork stating, because like I said, they make a really big deal of taking your rights. When you get to your probation parole office, imagine, Carl just came out of prison and he's going, and the very first place that Carl goes, well, hopefully they take him to eat first, but then the next stop is his probation office, his parole office. He meets his parole agent in person. And then, one of the things she has us do immediately is sign a piece of paper saying that you know that you are not eligible to vote. And so I believe they should do the same thing when you are released. When they say, on that great day, when they finally say, "Oh, Fields, you are done. You have done what the state has asked you to do. Here, sign this," saying that not only do you know that you are eligible to vote, but you know that you have a civic responsibility and a duty to vote. We really would like for them to do that. And both the governor and the DOC secretary support Unlock the Vote. And so, again, we really would like it to be state law that they let people know. So that's one of the things. But the other thing, Georgiana, is just having conversations like we're having right now. Some of the best education that we do is what Ray is doing when he bumps into brothers on the street, and what Carl's doing when he runs into his homies on the streets. It's just saying, hey, that you have these this right and this responsibility to vote. Are you registered to vote? Do you vote? Do you have your right to vote? And being able to answer questions. We used to, prior to COVID, actually go and stand outside of the probation parole office and have those conversations with people, not just because we wanted them or we wanted to figure out whether or not they were eligible to vote, but also because we wanted them to know that at some point you are going to be eligible to vote. And when that day comes, like Ray said, if you need help, we want you to contact EXPO, and we want to help you and walk you through that whole process. So that's part of what needs to change.
Right. And so what are some of the things that you think that volunteers could do? I mean, people who want to get involved, and how could they be helpful? Well,
we definitely, like right now, EXPO has a volunteer opportunity. We are working with the Campaign Legal Center, and we have a text line set up where we answer questions for people who may or may not be sure if they're eligible to vote because they have a previous felony conviction. And so that's very important work. We need people at the polls who are sympathetic to people like Carl and Ray and other people who are coming in and voting for the very first time. We've done voting drives at the building that we work in, which is Welford Sanders here in Milwaukee. And we've had people tell us, I am registered to vote, but to be honest, I've never gone to vote because I don't know what happens there. I don't want to feel silly. I don't understand how to read the ballot. I don't know who's on the ballot. I don't know what the people on the ballot do. And so therefore, I just don't feel like I have, any right going to vote. And so we've developed, we call it Government 101. We'll literally take and walk you through the whole process and teach you, in November, these are the people that are on the ballot, and this is what they do. And that's some of what, Carl and Ray do also. And again, Carl's not eligible to vote. That does not mean that Carl is not out there hustling. He is not out there campaigning for people that he believes in, not out there doing doors, not out there making phone calls. Carl does all of that and more. And he also registers people to vote because even though he's not eligible to vote, he can still register people to vote. He can still talk to people about who's on the ballot. Again, Ray, the same thing. Ray was registering and getting people to vote before he could vote. And we understand that it's important that we do that.
That's so important. So Carl, before we close our word, what are some last things you'd like to tell people who are viewing this video about how important it is to keep working on this issue?
I think it's a huge deal because all of what myself, Peggy, Ray has been saying is that we've had to push for there to be a ritual of putting the understanding that these civil rights are back in a person's hands when they discharge, and that's a travesty, really, because community corrections, their mission statement and their vision statement is all about bringing a person back into community, keeping them there safely, and helping them to exercise pro-social behavior that works for all of us, including them. So for us to have to push for this piece of the puzzle is shocking to us, really, because the public believes this is already the case. A statement came up earlier about, former felons and having paid your dues. All of that's language around people like me, people like Ray. But the truth of the matter is, a felony is a lifetime thing. Unless you get some mountain to be moved and get a governor or the president to sign off on your paperwork, you're carrying a stigma forever. And that stigma also comes with the second-class citizenship. People who want to get involved, first and foremost, we need for them to spread the message that a second chance, a third chance, a fourth chance is a real thing, and it needs to happen because that's what we've invested in with community corrections, with prisons. We also need for people to, like Peggy was saying, canvassing. We need people to, be willing to make phone calls to that effect. We need for them to get on the different texting trees that exist. But when COVID is over, to invite us into spaces that they are, because we couldn't otherwise get into those spaces, whether it's virtual or physically. We like to speak our truth and that we want to be a part of community as much as anybody else, but there are real barriers that are systemic that prevent us from doing so.
Thank you. How about you, Ray?
The one message that I want to get out there is, if you don't know whether or not you're eligible, ask. Somebody knows somebody that knows somebody that knows that answer. And so keep asking that question and find out. And if you are eligible to vote, register and vote, because if you don't vote, you have no right to complain about anything that's going on. Unless you put the people in place that are going to do the things that are going to make the changes for all of our lives, until you vote, you have no right to complain about it. And I learned that the hard way, but it was a lesson that I needed to learn, and I appreciate learning it the way I did. And so now every opportunity I got, I'm going to go vote so I can have a reason to complain about somebody not doing what they're supposed to be doing for us.
Thank you. How about you, Peggy? Do you have a few last words for us?
So my advice is the same as Ray's. So you can tell that we spent a lot of time together, but definitely vote. And if you're running into issues, another issue that we didn't have a lot of time to discuss, but I think it's important, is that in the state of Wisconsin, if you owe money at the end of your felony probation or parole, they can extend your probation or parole because you have not paid your fees. So if you find yourself in that situation, if you contact someone, again, from EXPO, from the ACLU, we can help you work through that. We don't want anyone in the state of Wisconsin to not be able to vote because they owe fees.
Great, thank you. Erin, do you have any last questions? No, okay.
No, I appreciate everybody's sharing their experiences, so this has been great.
Yeah, thank you all so much. And I just want to say that at the end of the video, there will be some information about how people can volunteer and also about other resources that people can tap into besides EXPO, but certainly EXPO is number one. Anyway, thank you very much, all of you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Watch me slow, stepping on